Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our journey through music and art from 1900 to 1950. My name is Jordan, and today we're going to talk about Cubism. Now, Cubism can be a little bit confusing, so I'm going to try my best to condense it and make it as simple as possible for everybody to follow along with. So the main thing with Cubist artwork is that certain objects or things are analyzed, so they're looked at, they're broken up and reassembled in an abstracted or different from normal form. So instead of showing objects from a single viewpoint like a lot of traditional art, the artist shows the subject from a lot of different viewpoints to kind of represent the subject in a greater context. So that would be like taking a portrait or like a picture of somebody's face from here and from here, right? And then assembling it on one canvas. So that can seem like a really complicated procedure, and that's understandable. A lot of people would feel that way because it can be. But with the few steps that we can go through in our project today, we can make that really simple and help everybody here create their own Picasso portrait. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about the history. So featuring collages and works made of a lot of different mediums, so a lot of different styles and ways to produce art, like either paintings or sculptures. Cubism explored the human relationship with the regular and the extraordinary, and was really well recognized by its man-made qualities. Cubism isn't really something you can find in nature, and it's completely fabricated and made by humans. There's really no Cubism naturally in the world. So this was a really short artistic movement. It only lasted from 1907 to 1911, so a little over 110 years ago. And it extended and it mixed a lot with the Futurism movement, which we're going to talk about in next lesson. Although art critics do agree for Futurism that it reached the end of its life by 1919. So a big thing with Cubism is that although it was very short, it's considered probably the most influential movement of all of the 1900s, which is really crazy. The primary influence was the presentation of the 3D form, so of course everything in 3D that's human and in the real world, from the works of Paul Cézanne. So a more well-known offshoot of Cubism would be abstraction or abstract art. So all that abstraction really means is that it's a little bit aside from the norm. The way that you would present something or the way that something would be viewed is not really traditional, or it's not the normal way that you would perceive it and view it. And because of the way that you break up and reassemble things in Cubism, it does fall into the abstract art category. So one of the main people that we're kind of going to discuss today is Pablo Picasso. Now, you may have heard of Pablo Picasso before, but he is a very, very famous artist, and he had a lot of different periods in his life where he kind of mixed up his art styles, of course. So he had a blue period where he experimented with a lot of blue-themed art using a lot of deep violets and those types of color palettes. He had a rose period where I'm sure you can guess that it was a lot of reds, a lot of pinks, that type of warmer palette. There was an African-influenced era where he was taking sculptures and creating them in the style of a lot of African tribal masks from the time, since that was a very large discovery that was happening across the Atlantic. And the one that he's most well known for, which he only did for a few years, was Cubism, which is where a lot of his most famous works came from. So I'm going to have an example of a more traditional Cubist painting that he did right here. And as you can see, it's painted in a 3D manner, but from two very interesting perspectives, like we talked about. Now, the thing that you can see and what can make it very complicated is he is trying to mix certain parts of a same 3D object, right? So you could be taking this part of a nose and then trying to mix it with this side of a nose, right? It can be very complex to try and meld together. Now, that was considered traditional Cubism. A lot more common one that we see today is called crystal Cubism. So instead of having those really complex 3D shapes, everything is flattened out into a more traditional style of drawing. Now, this does abstract it more because when you were able to discern and make out certain parts of a face before, This makes it a lot more difficult, you know what I mean? You can only go left or right or up or down. There is no depth to it anymore. But for a lot of younger artists, this is a good way to get your foot in the door and experiment with Cubism without really scratching your head and finding a way to make it really easy for everybody. So that's where we're going to move on to our project for today. So using the handout provided, we are going to create a Cubist piece just like Picasso. So included in the lesson plan is a paint your own Picasso handout. What you're going to need for this lesson is crayons or markers, scissors, and glue. So what you really want to do is look online for different Cubist paintings and artists if you don't really like Picasso or if you want to try to find something else. There will be a few included that we've talked about already. And using the Picasso handout, you're going to want to choose to either draw a friend or family member from two different angles. So of course the first page is going to be them head on, and then from the side, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take that and then cut out certain pieces from each part of the portrait and assemble them all together on the third page that we have included. So once that's done, if you want to show off the artwork to your friends and family and see what they think of the new style, or if they can see themselves the image if you were the one that drew them like that, if they were the person that you decided to draw. If you want to continue, you can try and create more Cubist drawings and art from different angles. You can try one for maybe directly above and below, so maybe like looking at the top of somebody's head and then the very bottom of their chin. I think that'd be a really interesting thing to try out. It might be really complicated, but it's something to try. And then if you want to submit your art to ArtSphere Interactive, of course use the hashtag included at the beginning and end of the video. You can also find it on the bottom of the handouts, and we'd love to see some of your artwork. So that concludes today's lesson. I hope everybody was able to follow along well, and if not, there are some definitions at the bottom on the handout for more resources for you to look into. I hope to see you all in the next lesson where we'll be talking about futurism. Have a nice day.